Hello everyone, this is Loco S, and welcome back to your tutorial series for the F-5E. And in today's video, we're going to be going over the takeoff, flight, and landing tutorial. Before you get onto the runway, a quick little check that you should probably do if you have the time and waiting for a takeoff clearance is I'm gonna go here. Make sure your dampener switches are set to on. Make sure your radar is in standby so that you can quickly throw it into active when in combat. You will then also want to make sure your altimeter pressure is set to either the QNH for sea level altitude, or if you want altitude above your airfield, make sure you set it to the QFE of the airport you're at. And you want to make sure your flaps are set to full and that your speed brake is retracted. Now, other things to note are during right before you get into takeoff, while you're waiting here for takeoff clearance, or just about if you are just about ready to take the active runway, you want to make sure your trim is set up. You at least want to have a couple of degrees of trim set up in the aircraft. So I am setting my trim here with the trim pitch knob up here to at least give myself 3 degrees of pitch up trim. You can give yourself more trim as needed, and there is actually a guide to the correct amount of trim you should put into for various loadouts and weight configurations. At least putting in 4 degrees of pitch trim is what I recommend. That way, there's at least a bit of pitch trim assist to make sure you're getting off the runway relatively easily. You also might want to go ahead and turn on your missile sight mode here, and this will give you a bore-sighted pipper up here to help act as a guide towards your aircraft's where your nose is pointing. And other than that, the other thing you want to do before you take off is set your backup ADI here. So you can go here. Rotate your mouse wheel on the pitch trim knob, and it will uncage the red flag cage will go away, and then you will now have a calibrated backup ADI. If you do this during your shutter procedure and then you taxi, the backup ADI will it'll start getting out of whack because it's getting bounced around on the ground. So you don't want to set that up until you're ready to take the runway. Either when you're ready to take the runway or while you're actually on the runway. That would be ideal, but making sure you're doing it here while you're at the hold stop is a good spot for online servers, because that way you're not holding up traffic on the online server. So we will radio. The tower would have at this point we would have asked the tower for clearance to take the active runway. They will have radioed back to us saying yes, and we are now ready to actually take the runway. Another switch you can also keep an eye on, and you don't need to set this right away, but you can set this while you are taxiing onto the runway, is the auto balance switch. Set that to left low. That way it'll start draining more fuel from the larger right tank, and then once the two tanks are matched up in weight, you'll be good to go and balanced for your in-flight journey. Line up with the runway here, and I'm going to stop the aircraft. If you're trying to do a quick scramble takeoff, you don't have to necessarily stop or slow down. You can just go ahead here and hit this nose wheel strut while moving. Like I said, I am just slowing down just to slow down the pace of this video so I can you can pick up what I'm saying. So down here, this nose wheel strut extension switch, you definitely want to turn this on while taking off. This will raise the nose of the aircraft, like so. And then it'll give you a couple of extra degrees of AOA and help point the aircraft up into the sky to get it to take off. So you can do it while you're slowly moving. I wouldn't extend the nose wheel strut while on the ground taxiing around. It looks not only does it look weird, it probably does not help your aircraft's ground handling. So the nose wheel strut has been extended. We are good to take off. If your aircraft is in a very lightweight configuration with just 2 missiles on the outboard wings, you can get away with taking off with just military power, but and you can potentially even get away with taking off with just military power with just a small external fuel tank on the centerline pylon. However, The F-5E's engines are relatively weak, so pretty much your safest bet in taking off from any airport, especially small ones, while heavily loaded, is to hold the wheel brake down, throttle up to 80%, and then once you're at 80%, release wheel brake, and then go to burner. Use nose wheel steering to hold the aircraft straight for the first little bit of travel. And then once you get a little bit of speed in, you'll be able to release the nose wheel steering and then use rudder authority to keep your aircraft on the straight and narrow. Once you're past 150 knots, which is that 1.5 indicator on the speedometer, start pulling back up and your aircraft will start pulling off from the runway fairly shortly thereafter. Once you're past around 200, I believe 80, which is that yellow marker there, you will want to go ahead and potentially start nose trimming down to arrest your climb, and then once you're around 300, you can go ahead and cut off throttle, cut off the afterburner detent, and you will know you are out of afterburner when the fuel flow indicator right there drops down into like around the 200 range, and the RPM indicator as it just at 100. Temperature should be just above 500, and the nozzle position is fairly closed. So you are good to go here. Now, when you're in flight, some things to note. You can, if you want to set your index here, this is a function of the speedometer. You can actually adjust your index setting here. So you can use this. You can use this before takeoff to indicate like what your rotation speed for takeoff is. You can also use this to set like, hey, I want to maintain like X speed. You can use it for that. Or hey, I want to land at a certain speed. You can use that for that also. You want to keep an eye. This aircraft has 0 autopilot, so you do want to keep an eye on your vertical velocity indicator here to make sure you're while you're in the cockpit, you're not excessively pitching up or climbing. This aircraft can lose speed relatively fast in a climb if you are not careful, so you could easily find yourself stalling uncontrollably without knowing it if you don't keep an eye on your vertical velocity indicator and your speedometer. So keep at all times your eye on these two in flight. And as your aircraft picks up speed in level flight, you will start climbing, which will then pick your nose up, which will then cause your speed to drop. So you definitely want to keep on playing with your trim. Trim is very much your best friend with the F-5E. F-5E, you also to get the most out of your aircraft, you want to be in between 10,000 and 20,000 feet. You can easily climb to 30,000 feet for cruising, but the F-5E, it's very much at its home in mid to high altitude, so you definitely don't want to be on the ground with the F-5E a whole lot. Try to get up to at least 15,000 feet for general flight. You can cruise at 30,000 feet, although around 30,000 feet, the F-5E does tend to lose control authority because the air is that thin up there. So you definitely want to stick to like around like 15 to 25,000 feet for your general flight purposes. Also, for cruising, well, you can cruise at 100% max military power, max dry thrust. My preferred throttle setting for long-distance cruising or just general flight is between 90 and 95%. You can go all the way down to 80. I would say that for most flight in the F-5E, 80 is when you're trying to slow down. Like, if you're on approach to landing at an airbase, you might want to go down to 80% or 85% RPM for landing. 85 is the slowest, is the lowest RPM setting I would have for my engines during normal flight for transitioning from place to place. Between 90 and 95 is where I like to keep my throttle settings for general flight. That way, you're keeping above the dreaded 250 knot speed limit, because the aircraft, due to its very thin, small wings, does not like to fly low and slow. These wings do make it very agile, but again, that also means that you need to fly faster in order to maintain lift and maneuverability. Also, now that we are airborne, we can go ahead and officially, by the book, turn on our external fuel tank. And if you notice, the left and right fuel tanks here now have balanced out. That is good. That is what you want to see of the auto balancing system. Turning on the fuel pump, the external fuel tanks, will refill those tanks, and then we will eventually get a warning. We will eventually get a warning down here whenever those external fuel tanks do become empty. So whenever your external fuel tanks become empty, there is no MFD here to give you a warning about them being empty. A caution light will just appear, and then when that caution light appears, you extinguish that caution light by turning that external fuel tank switch to the off position, which will stop the external fuel tank from burning out its motor. And then you'll have a empty external fuel tank, and you'll be able to either carry it with you back to base, or if you need to ditch it, you can go ahead and use the selective jettison switch there and jettison your empty fuel tank through that method. We will go over selective jettison in a different tutorial video, just because I want to keep this as a general flight tutorial. So, again, we are now climbing up to 1,200 feet. Again, unless you are keeping a very close eye and focus on the F-5E's vertical velocity climb indicator gauge down here, it is very easy to unintentionally change altitude by a significant margin. So, to keep that in mind. As you see, however, though, at 12,000 feet, we are, and at only 95%, roughly 90% RPM, we are actually going at 350 knots indicated airspeed. So this is not, by any stretch of the imagination, a slow aircraft. But do keep in mind that the engines aren't the most powerful in the world, so you do need to gain altitude to gain speed to get out of the thicker, lower atmosphere, and you are going to need to run the engines pretty hard at all times to keep speed up. Still, it will never be a speed demon, but it's the Mirage, the F-5E's flight handling characteristics are more focused on maneuverability than outright speed. So you're still going to be able to go quite fast if you gain altitude. In fact, because we are at 13,000 feet now, and around 370, 380 knots. We're at Mach 0.7. So, giving you an idea of now general flight characteristics. Let's see here. Incirlik Air Base is behind us. We are currently, while this isn't a tutorial, I can give you a quick little briefing on this up here. Incirlik is roughly 40 miles behind us in that direction right there. So use that little needle right there. So let's see here. So it's right there. So we're good there. So roughly 40 miles there for the Incirlik Air Base. So we got plenty of we got a little bit of distance to get back to the air base. Our external fuel tank is yet to be depleted, so I definitely want to deplete the external fuel tank before we do landing to simulate a more realistic fuel landing weight. You can land the F-5E heavy, but you really don't necessarily want to. This is another one of those aircraft where the lighter your aircraft is, the easier it is to land, and it's not impossible to pop the tires in the F-5E. It's definitely somewhat durable in that regard, but you definitely don't want to land it too heavy or too fast. Thankfully, once you get the aircraft down, the drag chute does help slow down the aircraft immensely. So we're going to go into a bit of a dive here, and we're going to just showcase some F-5E flying through the mountains here on the this side of the Turkish border. Cutting our throttles to 80% in a dive because we're going to gain quite a lot of speed in the dive. And now that we're leveling out here through the mountains, let's go ahead and put it into burner and show you that this aircraft is capable of going supersonic on the deck. Pitch up. Really good roll rate in this aircraft. That is one of the advantages to this F-5E with the short wing span, is that its roll rate is fairly significant. Dodge the power lines. Go into this slight turn here to get a bit of distance for our afterburner turn. Alright, there should be enough open space ahead of us to get into supersonic. Minimal control inputs to reduce any wasted energy. Caution. Oh, so there's our caution light for our external fuel tank. So we're going to go ahead, acknowledge the caution, turn off the external fuel tank, punch the external fuel tank off the aircraft to get reduce our drag. All right, we're going to go into a zoom climb now. So we're just under Mach 1. There might have been a aerodynamic change since the last time I flew this aircraft. But as we climb up to around... I know we can get this aircraft above Mach 1. You do have to climb... and again, the engines are fairly weak, so you are going to have to... you will get way better performance in thinner atmosphere higher up. So... we actually managed to kill the aircraft. Well, that was new. Never managed to do that. I think I accidentally starved the engine yeah, I think I managed to actually accidentally starve the engine, so that's a thing. Thankfully, all of our systems came back online once we gained electric power, so do keep in mind that if you do have a problem like that with the engine, you can always go ahead, put it to idle, and then try to windmill the engines back up. And we managed to do that. So now that we're in level flight, and our engines are behaving, let's go to afterburner again. And we do want to, again, like I said, we do want to actually burn fuel. We do want to actually burn fuel in the F-5E for landing to showcase a bit more of a realistic landing profile for this aircraft. All right, we're at 19,000 feet. Pushing through the transonic barrier is a bit difficult for all aircraft, so it's not a surprise that we weren't able to do it on the deck. At 20,000 feet, we should be able, however, to push through, and it looks like we are just about to. I'm adjusting the trim. I believe we just passed through the supersonic barrier at the sound barrier at 21,000 feet. So let's go ahead and we go to the F3 view. No sound, and then boom. All right, so we're definitely going to cut the engine power there. The other thing that I did remember about the F-5E is it's entirely possible that we put the burners on for too long, and not only did we negative G, not only did the negative Gs that we pulled going down to level flight starve our engines, it's entirely possible, I believe, that the F-5E's fuel pumps are not able to maintain afterburner for an extended period of time. So do be careful when using the F-5E's afterburners. it's very much not an aircraft meant to be constantly on afterburners at all times. And in fact, all that stunt flying I did with the afterburners has drained our fuel tanks down to roughly 50% capacity. Which means it's a good time to start heading back to the base. We are still maintaining supersonic speeds, I believe, through this dive. So there is that. Even though we're at 90% power. Okay, there we go. Alright, we're navigating back now to our air base for landing. So yeah, do keep in mind, this is your fuel gauge down here for your flight. Your fuel flow is right here, so this is how much fuel you're consuming at the moment, and this is how much fuel you have remaining. As you can see, the aircraft, now granted the left fuel tank is slightly smaller than the right fuel tank, but this is roughly an idea, like roughly once you get to around 1,200 pounds of fuel. Right here, this is roughly your 50% mark, and there is no bingo indication for this aircraft. This aircraft does not have a way to measure bingo, but usually around 1,200 pounds of fuel is a good marker of bingo fuel for this aircraft, and you want to start heading back home around that time. So this is not this wouldn't be all that of a difference for the F-5E as flight time and performance, especially because for a good bit of that time we were on pure afterburner for no good reason. The F-5E does have small fuel tanks, so do keep that in mind that when you are an afterburner, you are chewing through fuel quickly. But if you're just flying around in general, keeping the RPM around 90 to 95, your fuel flow state is pretty... you are still getting quite a lot of distance for your fuel flow. So in that case, you'll still get plenty of flight time in the F-5E, especially if you have a single external tank. So let's see here. We're just cruising roughly around 10,000 feet right now. And Surlik is 15 miles off on our nose. See if we can see it from up here. Because I know in Surlik, there's the city right there, and then there's the mountains down below. Ah, there's the Surlik, and the Takan's beacon is on the far end of the airbase, right around there. So that is indeed our pointing to the right spot. So let's cut our engine RPMs to 80% to help slowing us down. We can extend air brakes as well to get our airspeed down fairly quickly. This isn't going to be necessarily a full landing approach and of the Lake tutorial. I want to do a dedicated landing circuit and approach video for every single aircraft. Not for every single aircraft, but for in general. Because for a lot of aircraft, the whole procedure of going into the circuit and doing the circuit is very similar. And it helps also with online servers to have a standard format for all aircraft. So for I mostly want to focus on the getting the actual aircraft ready for landing, as well as teaching you just how to get the aircraft down in one piece. So F-5E, you definitely want to get the air brakes out. You definitely want to get below 300 for landing. Anything above 300 is way too fast for landing, and really anything above 250 is fast for landing. You don't want to go below 200 knots, however, until you're right about ready to start landing, because the aircraft does become slightly uncontrollable. So do keep that in mind. You want to balance out your needs for controllability with airspeed, with getting the aircraft slow enough to land. That is the one challenge about this aircraft. Landing can be a bit of a pain if you're trying to land it too slow. And don't worry about landing it too fast or slightly too fast on the ground. That's what the parachute is for. Alright, so we're going to bleed off quite a bit of airspeed now in the turn on our final turn to landing. You want to make sure the gear is extended. Extending the gear will also induce more drag, so your aircraft will start slowing down even more so than with the air brakes extended. Okay, we're almost on. Made too wide of a turn while trying to talk and fly at the same time. We're getting below 200 knots, so you want to be careful. You can be just below 200 knots and be okay, but you don't want to be too far below 200 knots. There's a runway. We'll get lined up. We'll get now properly lined up with the runway here. Again, this is not a how to do an approach video for landing. This is just a video learning how to set up the aircraft for landing and actually getting it on, doing the very last minute stuff you need to do to get to land. So, aircraft is landed there. You will notice on the left of the HUD there is an indicator light. That is your AOA indexer. You want to try to you want to try to get the aircraft slow enough so that your rate of descent, where you think you're about ready to land, is there, and it's also a green light, so you want to try to get the aircraft slow. You want to get definitely on this final approach down to under 200. It's okay if it's yellow, you don't want it to be red. There we go, green. There's our green bulb, so we're roughly on the correct AOA for landing. You can even cut power here and coast it down. You want to be around 175 on touchdown. And then landing, you can tap the wheel brakes to slow it down. Deploy the drag chute to really slow you down. And then you want to cut the chute. And then push it in. And then now you can use, for this last little bit, your wheel brakes to slow yourself down. Until you're at taxi speed, and then you are good to go. And that's it for landing the takeoff, and flight in the Mirage 2000, not the Mirage 2000, the F-5E. The F-5E, like I said, for landing, you definitely want to, while you're in the landing circuit, you want to be above 200. But once you start getting on final approach, you definitely want to really start cutting back on the throttle, and you want to get your landing. You want to be on your final. Ready to go into landing just under 200, especially around 200, and then when you touch down, you want to be around 150 knots to 170 knots, like around this area right here. And then you also want to pull up enough where you have the green light for the AOA indexer appearing. It could be yellow and green, or it could be solid green. If you are red, however, that means you are too slow and you are likely to slam the aircraft into the ground too hard, and or not even make it to the threshold of the runway. If it is yellow on landing, that can be dangerous too. That means you've landed too fast, and you could exert, depending on how heavy your aircraft is, you can exert too much pressure on the landing gear and pop the tires. And actually, if you land even hard enough, not only will you pop the landing gear tires, you will actually crush the landing gear into the body of the aircraft. So keep that in mind. Be careful when flying the F-5E when landing. You can help, again, landing by not dumping fuel, but basically you can fly around, go into burner for quite a bit on your return trip, get your fuel to roughly around 1,200 pounds in both tanks, and you will be good for landing. You'll be a good weight for landing, especially if you expended your ordnance. So that's it again for my F-5E landing tutorial. Hope to see you all out there in the skies of DCS, and I will see you all next time.